Okay, so this is our second week of Forgotten Virtues of the Early Church that David and I are doing. This week is poverty, so good job everyone coming back. This sounds kind of scary, but I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. Last week, David talked about the concept of stability. So when we were planning this class, we could think of like 3 P words, and then we couldn't think of a 4th P word, and it ended up being stability. So he started off with the one that is kind of the odd one out, but now the other 3 weeks should all be P's. So poverty is today. What comes to mind when you hear the word poverty? Poor, yeah.
Under-resourced.
Under-resourced, yeah. Hunger. Yeah. Forgotten. Does poverty have a positive or negative connotation? Negative, generally negative. And why do you think that is?
Nobody wants to be all those things.
Yeah. We don't want to have not enough. Right? It's a scary place. Why else do you think it has a negative connotation?
Because people look at you different.
Yeah. People look at you different. Mm-hmm.
Because you're not smart because you're poor.
Mm-hmm.
Constant insecurity.
Constant insecurity. Yeah, kind of this constant state of, we imagine living in this constant state of anxiety where what if I don't have enough for tomorrow? Even if I have enough today, what if I don't have enough for tomorrow or for next month or next year? And that is really scary.
And it's hard for us to even imagine.
Yeah. For some of us, that might be really easy to imagine. That might be where we have been or where we are. And for others of us, that might be a really hard thing to imagine if that hasn't been our experience in life. Does the amount of things you own matter?
It's a consumable thing. I mean, matter, not in a spiritual sense, but on a practical sense. I mean, if it's a consumable, then the amount, is kind of important. And, you want to run out.
Yeah, you want to have enough, right, for your needs, for your basic needs. Is it okay to have more than that?
I think it can change who you are.
Okay.
It has the power to do that, I believe.
Say more. It can change
Like
who you are.
if I won the lottery or something, I've told many times, I don't participate in that. I just choose not to, but I think it would change who I am. It would be a battle to not be changed, I think, for some.
Yeah, it can impact your identity.
Yes.
Is what I hear you say.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is interesting, that connection of the possessions, maybe the amount of possessions that we have, or the kinds of, I don't know, maybe the ability to get whatever we want whenever we want it can change our identity. Yeah.
I think that the amount of things we have can sometimes desensitize us to other people's needs. We are removed from that now. It's how we just can't feel it anymore.
Yeah, if we're not used to living in that state of anxiety, maybe we lose that empathy or that connection that we could have with someone else who is in that place.
Can't feel it.
Yeah.
I think the worst kind of that is, when someone comes from poverty and brings themselves up, or with their thought is that they brought themselves out of poverty, by their own bootstraps, I think it's more challenging for them to have compassion.
Yeah, that can happen
be more
sometimes.
compassion.
Yeah, sometimes our own story makes us think that should be everyone's story. And maybe there's a lot of reasons why we are where we are with the resources that we have, especially if that changes throughout our life. Yeah. There's a lot of factors. So this class was really interesting to plan because there's actually so much that we could say about it. I told David, I was like, I think we should do this could be a whole class series that we could talk about possessions and materialism and all of these things and poverty and our connection to all of that. Maybe that will happen. Y'all can vote at the end of class. But it was we'll just kind of see where the class goes, because I feel like there's just so many different things that we could talk about and ways that we could talk about this. But I also think it's especially relevant for us in America and in 2025, in this time, to talk about our relationship with possessions and with the things that we own. So I found this graphic that I thought was really interesting, kind of this, what we a lot of times imagine our connection with material things and happiness. So there's kind of this unconscious, this flawed assumption of materialism, that the stuff that we have, or you could, include money, power, fame, we think that those things will make people love us and will make us feel enough. These needs for autonomy, I can take care of myself. I have the ability to take care of myself if I have enough money. If I have the things I need, I don't need anybody, so I don't need to depend on anyone. And that can feel really good. I'm very competent to take care of myself. I don't have to depend on other people. And we think that that will lead to happiness. Do you feel like this has been, have you observed this to be true in your life? What do you think?
I mean, I think, obviously, you have too much, it tends to not really fill you up for a certain point. But I think we'd also be kind of remiss in saying, there's a certain baseline needs that need to be met for you to have a stable life and that feed into, kind of all the good things. So I do think there's like a little bit of balance to this, to where stability is, I think we were talking about that last week for a little bit, is a good thing, and that, some basic needs being met are helpful.
Yeah, I think about like the Lord's Prayer, praying, give us today our daily bread.
Right.
Praying that God will give us what we need today for our basic needs. We're not worried about, we know that God will provide for us tomorrow. But that is a really hard mindset to stay in the context that we're in today. And so I feel like we're constantly fighting that, George.
I really don't see that as, I can see that from media sources, but I don't see that in normal people or regular people.
Yeah.
People we're happy to have family. We're happy to be around friends. We don't need to be well known to have that. I think that's kind of a blown out of proportion type of thing. Oh, he's a great football player or actor or whatever. And we're never going to be football players or actors. Who cares?
Yeah, so maybe that's not like the central focus of the relationships that you have, which I think is something particularly beautiful about BAML, and the way that our intention has been to cross demographics and build relationships across all different kinds of people. That those things, the stuff, the fame, the money, the power, is not the thing that draws us together, right? That's not the focus of our relationships.
Again, that's a media. I still think that's a media thing that try to get us to.
When you're like advertising, this is the goal of advertising, is to make you believe this, right? Is that if I buy this product, if I buy this steam mop for my house, I will be able to clean my house better. And if I can clean my house better, the people who come over to my house will notice how clean my floors are, and they will think I'm a really good mom and a really good homemaker.
So I can bring a white glove,
right?
And go.
Yeah. Like there is this, I feel this in some way in my own life, where like there is this weird progression of like, oh, if I get this product, or if I can get this thing and I can add that to my life, then maybe it will make me more worthy of love.
I mean, there's several, this is not one of them, but there are several communities that exist, that this is their reality.
Yeah.
This is how they measure each other up, is by the stuff they have, fame, the money, and this is the goal. I mean, it's not gonna be in places where, you know, for example, here necessarily, all the time, and I won't say that, you know, I can't generalize in that way, but I could say that there exists plenty of circles where this is the actual
Yeah.
lived out reality.
Yeah. And so some of our life is spent fighting that,
Right.
fighting that in ourselves and other
I
people.
was gonna say, like, you talked about marketing and what we see. If people didn't want this, then marketing companies wouldn't
Wouldn't do it.
It wouldn't work.
say this is
Yeah.
what you should have.
That's right.
Then it wouldn't change how people buy or react. But the reality is this is what people react to
That's right.
by and large in our society.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say this is exactly what the
Mhm.
majority of people in our society want.
Think about retail therapy.
Yeah.
Retail therapy is a phrase for a reason. It makes us feel good
Yeah.
when we feel like we can afford to buy things, maybe without having to think too much about it, right? There was this quote that I found from, I do not know how to pronounce her name. I'm not going to try, but she is a happiness researcher, which I think is the coolest sounding job. But she says, at the individual level, materialistic individuals are less satisfied and grateful for their lives, have less purpose, feel less competent in general, are more antisocial, and have weaker connections with others. Indeed, when it comes to relationships, those with materialistic goals not only rate their own social interactions more negatively, but people in general rate their relationships with them as less satisfying as well. Which I think goes back to what George was saying is if the stuff you have or the things you've achieved is the foundation of your relationship with somebody, this is what that's gonna look like. And so there are some very real consequences to our relationship with possessions and with kind of that chasing after those things and making that the center of our life. What are some gifts of being poor that being more wealthy might keep someone from experiencing? Yeah.
The first time Ike and I had an opportunity to make a relationship with someone who had grown up in poverty and who was a teen on her own in poverty, it was such an eye-opener for me because she had skills I had no idea about. And I thought, you know, if something catastrophic happened, I would not be able to survive like she would. And it was really, really good for me. It was
Mhm.
really good for me.
I love that. That's really interesting. Yeah, the skills that you need. Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you're good.
In a small group, we were all going around and we just happened to be telling stories about when we were struggling financially. And we were all telling stories like, oh, we couldn't afford to eat this day, so we just had to be like, okay, well, you know, that's just a tough day, you know. And then this one couple, you know, I have so much compassion for them, but they said, you remember that one time when we had to gather up change to eat that steak dinner? And I was like, you just don't know.
You
You just have no
never know.
idea what it's like. I mean, steak dinner, that's so outside of the realm of financial possibility, you know, in a lot of people's lives. I mean, you know, on a daily, I mean, like steak dinner, I mean, that's so, you know, it's expensive to go to McDonald's.
Yeah.
You know, much
Yeah.
less a steak dinner. So it's, I think what they lack is resourcefulness, you know, having to come up with some sort of meal at the end of the night, you know, when your kids are hungry, and it may not be a most nutritious meal that you could possibly, you know, come up with.
It's not when I make it either, so. Yeah, yeah. What about, so the one I think about is gratitude. The amount of gratitude. So one of the things that we don't normally stock at Manna, like on a regular basis, but when we can, we like to have it is vegetable oil. And the responses from people who have come in who are able to get vegetable oil on the weeks that we've had it, I've never felt that about vegetable oil. Like I've never had that amount of gratitude for something like that in my life. And I think the amount of gratitude that you might feel about things that I overlook.
And if you're talking about that then, what do they do with it?
They use it over and over.
That's right.
till it's gone.
Mhm.
That, most of us would say, you know, out the trash, but they,
Which is there's something even in that is a gift of being able to respect, this is what I have, and I'm gonna use that as much as I possibly can, you know, not being wasteful.
Talking about manna and those who are grateful to receive what you have to give them, think about the females who come there asking for feminine products like sanitary napkins that they can't buy,
Yes.
and you have them, you should see the look on their faces of gratitude. You
Yep.
can buy something like that.
Absolutely. Things that are so expensive that we don't always think about. Diapers, another thing that people, you know, and I think there are gifts, you know, I would love to be more grateful for the things that I have. And I think that would enrich my life. So, yeah.
I feel like I should write a book. But growing up, I would say broke, not necessarily poor because we have family. And as I grow older, I realize that the connections of family that got us through that, or has gotten us through, that is so much richer than than a lot of people will ever have, because of you're helping each other out constantly. You're trying to, you know, you mentioned the gratitude. I never took things for granted. Like, I teach my kids not to take things for granted. When I asked my son this week, I said, some of your friends may not be receiving SNAP benefits. Can you make sure that you're looking around in the cafeteria, if there's someone who's not buying their lunch, or for whatever reason, you step up. I can put extra money in your lunch account. You step up and you pay for that.
Yeah.
Teaching him to see
Right.
that you won't. I don't know that that's always something, but I mean, the survival skills, the strength,
Yeah. The social
gotta figure it out.
the social network piece, and like there's so many factors that create safety nets, or if you don't have them, make it much harder. So I am a single mom, and I have family that is here that if my kid is sick, or if I need some, you know, school is closed or whatever, I have people that can watch my kids so I can go to work. But if I didn't have that, and if I didn't have family and people that could watch my kids, I couldn't go to work that day. Like that, even just something as simple as that, like impacts financially if you have to miss a day of work. Not everyone gets paid for that day. You know, so even looking at those little things and those things to be grateful for, that a lot of times it is easy to take for granted if they've just been parts of our lives. What scriptures come to mind when you think about poverty, wealth, or possessions? There are so many.
The first one I thought of was, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God.
You cannot love both God and money.
Cannot love both God and money. So, what else?
It's more blessed to give than receive.
It's more blessed to give than receive. Stories or scriptures? Stories in scripture.
Rich young ruler that Jesus tells to give away all that he has.
Yeah, I don't like that one very much. I was hoping no one would say it. Yeah, the rich young ruler.
Solomon in his Ecclesiastes, and is looking at the things he built
Yes.
and what is really important.
Yeah, he had all this stuff.
And it's meaningless unless
And it
your focus is right.
Yeah.
Why do you worry about tomorrow? The lilies of the field.
Not worrying about tomorrow.
The early church just relying on one another and taking care of, it was a community.
Yeah. This
Took care of
communal
one another.
living of helping each other out. Yeah.
I'm going to push back a little bit about blessed are the poor in spirit. Because when I think of that scripture, it means in spirit. When people are grieving, when people are poor in spirit, to me means more of an emotional place instead of a financial place. Because even in poverty, you can be rich in spirit.
That's true. I do, some of y'all might know this. I don't know because I didn't study it before this class. I think that one of the, is it Luke?
Luke has
You know what I'm
poor.
gonna say? Yeah, actually says, does it say blessed are the poor? I think there is one that
The poor.
kind of leaves off, but it's, yeah, they're different. Like,
Well, what
and
that
both
would-
are true, and
yeah,
both
no,
are
yes,
valid. Yeah,
absolutely,
absolutely.
valid. And I found that you know, the rich young ruler, because your wealth wasn't ever there
Yeah.
as someone in poverty, like
Yeah.
you're constantly
Mhm.
giving it away or taking
Yeah.
it's constantly taken away.
Yeah.
You don't have that connection to materials like
Mhm.
other people have. Like
Yeah.
you let go very easily. Like I would tell my kids, like nothing I had
Mhm.
was mine.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
I shared with my sister, or I
Yeah.
shared with whoever. It was never just fully yours. I can't really recall a possession that was like,
Mhm.
okay, this is only mine and mine. Only as an adult have I had
Which
that.
impacted like your relationship with possessions, which is what I
Correct.
hear you talking about. Like it's
Yeah.
not the actual amount. Is it okay to have this much? Is it okay to have this much? Like that's the wrong question.
Right.
And the question is, what is your relationship with those things, and who do they really belong to? And you know, do they really just belong to me? Do they belong to the people around me? Do they belong to God? How does that impact how I use those things? So I was in a long time ago. I was in the Dominican Republic, and we listened to this, like we were part of this like street preaching campaign, and we were sitting and we were listening to the preacher that night. And we're surrounded by people who have very, very little, and they've shared their homes with us, they've shared their food with us. And we're listening to this street preacher, and his topic for his sermon was on the dangers of materialism.
Mhm.
And I was so struck by, this is actually not about the amount of stuff. Like you're saying, like it is about the condition of our heart, because you can have very little and be very attached to it,
Yes.
and be very in danger of some of this materialistic tendency. Or you can have a whole lot and have practiced this kind of detachment to it. I'm skipping ahead in our class, but you know, and so like, what do we do with that, and how do we navigate that? Okay, I'll keep going. This is the one that I thought of. Well, I thought of a lot of those. I started to write down the scriptures, and then I was like, there's just too many, so we'll kind of name a few, and then we can read this one. But this is from 1 Timothy, that just really talks a whole lot about money and the things that we own and our relationship with that. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. I feel like there's so much rich language there that is really convicting, but also really inviting to me. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. We feel that a lot. But to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. What stands out to you from this scripture?
Not much different from today.
Different? No,
No.
not much different from today. Yeah, this could have been written in 2025, and I would believe it.
The word trap, I thought that was powerful.
Yeah.
Temptation and a
Mhm.
trap.
Mm-hmm.
And foolish, harmful desire.
Yeah, well, and it
That
looks
plunge,
like it
those are
will,
strong
they're very
words.
strong words. Yeah, the word trap, like it looks like this will be the answer and the solution for us. But it's a trap. That's what I think of when I hear that.
I see the tension between contentment and striving. So to the point you made earlier, it's not necessarily primarily about how much stuff you have,
Right.
but more towards your attitude of what you're.
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
you're
that
doing.
tension of like, it's about our relationship with it, and sometimes it is about how much we have. Like, both can be, like, sometimes we're not able to have a whole lot and have a healthy relationship. It's like, it's bringing up the dangers of that, and we have to wrestle with that, right?
If I didn't, if I wasn't exposed to this scripture early on, I don't think I would even know that a love of money is possible, or that it could be connected with a root of all kinds of evil. I don't know that I would have known that.
I might name something else. If someone says, what do you think is the root of all kinds of evil? I would probably name a whole lot of things before I would land on, oh yeah, I think it's money. I think that's interesting.
Sorry, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I'm reflecting on things like, it's Luke 6:20 where it uses the wording, blessed are the poor. And I think your question earlier about like what are the gifts that you can have if you're poor that we might neglect if we're rich is a true and valid question, and there are gifts there. I feel like there's also a tension of, I don't want to, I don't know what the right word is, valorize is what's coming to mind, but that's not the word I'm looking for, poverty itself, because we know that having enough money to be able to buy food and clothes and have stable shelter does improve people's lives in real ways.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think when Jesus in the Beatitudes says, blessed are they, he means he's going to be blessing these people, right? It's not that we should always be mourning. It's
Right.
not that we should want everybody to always be poor.
Right.
It's that those are groups of people that need a blessing,
Yes.
you know, and Jesus is bringing it. And so there are gifts and there's also genuine harm.
Yes.
And that's a different tension that I wrestle with.
Yes, and when we are praying for the kingdom of God and the will of God to be done here as it is in heaven, that part of what we're praying for is that we all have enough. Everybody has enough. We're praying against that poverty, the very real, tangible poverty that exists in people's lives. Because it shouldn't, right? And God's intention for the world and the flourishing of people, poverty should not exist.
And follow up on that, I think one thing that if you have a lot of resources at your disposal, that one gift you cannot give is a sacrificial kind of gift for financial resources. Because if you're wealthy, you can give 90% of your wealth and you're still pretty good. I mean, you're still okay. You're gonna eat it in the morning. And that's just something that, I think that's something to value the poor in the sense that they can give their meal, their only meal to someone else. And that's a real sacrificial kind of gift that I think is inspiring and has a very good, it has a good chance of bringing that person to Christ, the one that received the gift.
Yeah, that's a great
wow,
point.
this person gave their only meal.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of having less than does offer us is this connection to the concept of sacrifice. And that can be really hard to attain when you have more than enough. What does that look like in your life? Yeah, and there's a lot of other ways you could do sacrifice.
I just think it's interesting that this is tied a lot to ambition. And so I think there's something about it that, certainly you want to be a productive person. I mean, that's a virtue, I think. But just like any virtue, like extended beyond that, because I think a lot of the materialism is maybe not so much just the love of goods themselves, but what that represents. It's like it represents success. And so a lot of times I think that's what drives is a motivating factor. We want all this stuff because it's a marker that we,
'Cause
So it's,
underneath that,
it's
we
almost
want
like
something
pride
else.
is
Yeah.
the thing that
Yeah.
is really intertwined with this a
Yeah,
lot.
it's like money is the thing that's gonna get us to the thing we really want.
But if we don't have some ambition, then, so this is I think it's really tricky. I don't
It's
think
really
it's real
tricky.
obvious, like,
Yeah,
how to balance this.
yes. Well, I mean, this is,
well.
yeah, is money good or bad? Yes, yeah. It's it's like, that's the tension where we wrestle with, it's a tool, it's something that exists, it's something we need, it's also something that can be harmful to us or to someone if they don't have enough of it, and so what do we do with our relationship with it, right? Do you have something?
I was going to respond to what you have on that previous screen, something that sometimes brings up that debate in many of us, that last sentence, in this way they will lay up good treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age. And, we wonder sometimes, God talks about rewards, because what you do in this present time, and that it seems to me that in some instances it says that in the coming age, when you're with the Lord, you will receive rewards for what you did here. And often we will say, no, that's no such thing.
Yeah.
But from what I've studied, it seems like it does show that you'll be rewarded for what you did in this age. And so a lot of us like to poo-poo that idea, but it still says that the coming age,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the part of this that stands out the most to me is the word contentment at the top. Godliness with contentment. Because I think that's kind of underneath a lot of this, chasing things and chasing, having more and having too much, or trying to plan so much that we will have more than enough for tomorrow, and like, where's the contentment in that? And it really is a state of anxiety. It can create that state of anxiety. You have that state of anxiety whether you're poor or whether you have plenty, because you can be so afraid you're gonna lose it, or so afraid that's not gonna be enough for you. And you can be anxious in both of those places, but cultivating that contentment in our lives, how do you do that? Like, how do you trust that God will give you what you need? Right?
There's a lot to be said for having wealth and therefore being able to help others. That's
Absolutely.
that's admirable, but we always must remember that God doesn't need my money, He needs me.
Yeah, the women who supported Jesus' ministry financially is who I think of. Like, there are ways that people have blessed me financially because they had the means to do that. There are ways that people have blessed each other in this church because they had the means to do that, which I think is a beautiful picture of what church is supposed to be, right? And so, yeah, these are really nuanced and hard things to read. Any other comments on this before I move on? Okay, so I want to get to a little bit of the history part, since that's kind of what we are talking about. I think Clark brought this one up earlier. In the early church, and what do we see in the early church? There were both wealthy and poor followers of Jesus. And in a lot of ways, the gospel is a gospel that is spoken to the poor and the marginalized and the outcast, and that is true. And at the same time, the people who were following Jesus, we saw people who were wealthy, people who were poor. And so what does that look like in the early church? And so this is from Acts 2. We love Acts 2:42, and I have read the beginning of this and had it read to me a whole lot more than the rest of it. So this is what it says. They devoted themselves, this is the early church, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. That's the part I know. That's the part that was taught to me in church. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. I do feel like I've heard that first sentence and that last sentence a lot more than the middle part. And the middle part I have heard a lot, but I feel like it's just kind of been read and then skipped over. I don't know, maybe that's just my experience. But this is so powerful to me. This idea that this is how the early church interacted, because there was this understanding of my relationship with Jesus changes my relationship with the things that I own. Thoughts on this? All of that changed. All of that changed, as a lot of things changed with Constantine in the 4th century. And so the short version is that this was the first Christian emperor. Okay, this is the first time, because Constantine was the Roman emperor who converted to Christianity. So for the first time, Christianity, church and empire were connected. This is the first time we see like Christianity and politics intertwined. And it's been great ever since, right? But for the first time too, Christianity was given resources. They didn't have resources before. It wasn't the religion of the state. It wasn't promoted by the empire. But now, all of a sudden, it was elevated and it was given resources. And that shifts so many things. And then wealth became really, really common for churches. Churches were suddenly very wealthy because they were given more than what they needed. And then church leaders, we had very wealthy bishops and people who were these church leaders, very, very wealthy people, thanks to people in powerful positions. And so suddenly that creates a very different relationship with money, and it could be argued there were good things that probably were able to be done with that. Hospitals were built, churches were built, and that you could argue those are very good things. And at the same time, maybe there were some downsides to that. Maybe there's also corruption. There's also when people are chasing money over the actual office that they're holding. And there can be a lot of danger in that. So there was a lot of corruption. There were things that people noticed was a problem, which is where we get, and as a response to a lot of things, but monasticism and these desert fathers and mothers kind of responded to a lot of the things that they were seeing by saying, okay, we want to renounce all of that. This is not what we see in Scripture. This is not what we see as being what it looks like to follow Jesus. And so we are going to start this movement where we are going out into the desert. We are going to try to rediscover what it means, what the gospel means, what it means to really follow Jesus. And so they took vows of poverty. They lived in extreme simplicity. They took, give us today our daily bread, very, very literally. Literally only want to, whatever I need to survive, which might mean I'm eating 1 or 2 meals a day, and it's very, very plain. I'm, wearing very plain. Think of John the Baptist. It's a great example. He's not a desert father, but kind of was. But there was this, and to what Jason said earlier, this elevation of a life of poverty. Like, the poor were almost lifted up as holy. It's holy to be poor. Like, that is the goal. Which there's some dangers in that too, like to what Jason was saying. That if I can achieve this life of poverty, I will be close to God. And that's not necessarily true. But the intention was to cultivate this full dependence on God that they were not seeing happen in the Roman Church. Okay. Then you have the Protestant Reformation, which is a very interesting kind of, we see another response that kind of brings a little bit more nuance into what has been happening. So this is a quote from Martin Luther. He says, if silver, he's just kind of trying to, imagine him like working this out in his head. He's like reading this history, and he's kind of lived through and trying to figure out like what's the answer here? Is money good? Is it bad? Do we need to all be poor? Do we need to not? Like, if silver and gold are things evil in themselves, then those who keep away from them deserve to be praised. But if they are good creatures of God, which we can use both for the needs of our neighbor and for the glory of God, is not a person silly, yes, even unthankful to God if he refrains from them as though they were evil? For they are not evil, even though they have been subjected to vanity and evil. If God has given you wealth, give thanks to God and see that you make right use of it. This is where Martin Luther kind of lands on, well, there's nuance here. You know, they're not, the actual thing isn't evil, but it has been used for evil, but it's also been used for good. And so maybe I'm ungrateful to God. Maybe, what if I'm not using the blessings that have been given to me? That seems like it's also not good. So just kind of imagine, this is like what my internal dialogue sometimes sounds like, well, if this, I don't know, what do you think? So I just kind of imagine him thinking through this and trying to wrestle with all of those nuances. Okay, so when we talk about the virtue of poverty, so we kind of have really established what is poverty. We know poverty is. What is the virtue of poverty? What would we be talking about when we're talking about a virtue? Something intentional that we are doing.
Some sort of habit of action that directs us away from materialism?
Yeah, some sort of, something intentional we're doing. Some practice, some habit, some way of shifting that relationship, right? Like away from materialism.
Because I think in some sense I agree with this quote, but where I always struggle if we're talking about Christianity in politics or Christianity in wealth or any of that is I take a somewhat pragmatic look at history, and it seems to me there is a corrupting influence it's hard to deny, right? I mean, we've got that phrase, that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I do think wealth is neutral in some intellectual sense, and I do think it can be used for good and should be used for good. But it's also really easy for the wealthy to kind of rest on that and say,
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah.
And yet there's still a corrupting influence that we can't ignore or take lightly.
Yeah, that scripture comes to mind where Jesus says it's harder for the rich, it's easier for a rich man to go through the eye of the needle than to...
Harder for a rich man to get into heaven.
There's a needle and there's a rich man and there's a camel. Yeah, anyway. You can look it up later.
The camel did better.
The camel got to heaven. Yeah, the camel got to heaven. Anyway, yeah, but that's what I thought of when you were talking. But yeah, when we talk about the virtue of poverty, I think that has looked, the reason I go through some of this historical thing, that has looked very different throughout history, depending on who you were to ask. And so part of the question that we're asking today is, what does that look like in 2025? Because it's not going to necessarily look like us going out into the desert or eating one meal a day on purpose of beans and rice, or like what does that look like for us? The virtue of poverty is less, not that it's not about this, is less about the amount of possessions you have, but about cultivating a detachment to material things, whether you are wealthy or whether you are not.
Yeah, it seems like the virtues that flow from it are like self-control.
Mm-hmm.
That's like one.
Yeah.
Prudence. This kind of restrained use of resources. I think it seems like it gets to some of the virtues that flow from it.
Yeah, like a great thing to think through is, what if I were less attached to the things that I own, what would I be able to do? What would that cultivate? Like, what other virtues might come from that? Yeah.
I've witnessed people in poverty be so generous
Mhm.
that, I mean, they had my full attention because I was witnessing something that was so real and genuine.
And part of
And
why
they
I
were
think
so
that
happy
is,
to do it.
yes, part of why I think that is because they know what that other person feels like.
That's right.
Yes.
They know what a gift it is to receive, right?
And they just, you could tell they just felt thrilled to be able to participate.
There's this mentality I think that we have that if I just had more, I could give more. It's not untrue. Like technically, it's not untrue, but I think it's really hard to do. I think the percentage we tend to give actually decreases as we get more wealthy. I have no statistics to back it up. That's just my thought. Yeah.
I feel there's another virtue of non-judgment towards the needs of others, whatever they might be.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
a teen mom,
Right.
you're not pointing the finger and, you know, spending your time doing that. You're, you know, you just say, what do you need?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a virtue because did Jesus say, point the finger as hard as
Right.
you can? You
Right.
know, no.
Yeah.
You know, Jesus just helped and saved and didn't even judge, even though he had every right to.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Recently, it's kind of what you said just reminded us. A few years back, there was a conversation of whether universal basic income should be something that happens in this country.
Right.
Whether just everyone, and maybe it's up to a certain tax bracket, would just get, I think the conversation was like $15,000 a year. And the conversation that stemmed out of that really showed it was a conversation about deserve. Like, do these people deserve this gift? And are they even going to use it well? Or are they going to just waste it? Just look at the way they live, or look at the way, you know, people that are really struggling. I think there's a sense of, that comes along with money. It's like, I did something good and hard. I worked hard for what I got, and we're just going to give it to them? And, you know, it's a sense of, at the heart of it, it's like, you know, it's good for me to have this thing, but not everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's really true.
We're talking about money, but poor people don't always just need money.
Yeah. Say more.
They need compassion, they
Yes.
need love, they need you to teach them.
Yeah.
Like people taught us how to get out of being poor, education.
Right.
But money is not everything. They
That's
don't
right.
always just need money.
Right. Yeah, sometimes it is easiest to just give money, and it is harder to build a relationship where you actually are helping someone get out of poverty, because you need both of those things, right? Yeah.
Have you seen the lady on TikTok who's called the Good Churches? That's her baby formula. Sit there and watch that a lot. And there's a big church here in town, well named, who just kind of passed her around and gave her no answer. And she called a mosque, and the guy's like, he was out the door like, what flavor, what, you know, whatever. And he was like ready to do it. And he called another Catholic church, and the lady's like, we don't have anything like that. She goes, how far are you? Can you get here? I have $10. And it's just how these big, beautiful churches, it was just a corporation.
And it's hard to give a little nuance. It is hard the bigger you get, I think. You have to have more systems in place.
But they were
it's
more,
very
they were
tricky.
more placing out her fault, the way they were talking.
Right, so there is a lot of kind of like what Clark was talking about, the judgment of, well, why are you in this situation? What did you do to get yourself in this situation? Whereas we don't ask always the same question of someone who has a lot of money. A lot of times that person may not have done something, and that's true on both of those sides, right? So like the reducing our
Some
judgment.
said that we don't help non-members.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of different policies. There's a lot of different policies out there. The other piece that I think is really important, I think maybe this goes back to something Jason said earlier too. The virtue of poverty, when we talk about poverty being an intentional virtue, calls for both, yes, our heart transformation, our relationship with our possessions, but also you cannot do that without some tangible action. And it's kind of the same when we taught when we did the class on hospitality. I really, really wanted it to be like more abstract, and I really wanted to talk about, you know, hospitality in our words and hospitality in the way that and sometimes it really actually means opening your home. Like, I really wanted it to not mean that. And I think that is true in this one too. I think that I think that it is about our heart and it is about our relationship to money, and actually having more than we need does impact us. And so there might be some tangible things that we actually do have to do. Now what those are might change from person to person and situation to situation, but I don't know that there is a way to actually practice this virtue without some actual tangible action on our part. All right, we have 5 minutes, I think. Yeah, we can do it. Here's the why behind the virtue of poverty. Some of the whys. Dependence on God. The less you have, the more dependent you have to be on God and other people, right? Like practicing that is not a bad thing, but a lot of times we think it is. And we don't like that feeling of having to be dependent on other people or on God. The freedom to love well. When we are able to practice this virtue, it gives us the freedom to love well and to be generous, because we are less attached to the things that we own. We get to identify and empathize with the poor more easily. And to what Curtis was saying earlier, we experience things like sacrifice and suffering, which allows us to identify with Jesus. So these kinds of things are the why behind why would you even think to do this? Like, why would that even be a thing that you would want to look into and pursue?
You mentioned the heart of the matter, and I was thinking how much respect I have for those organizations, nonprofit groups that help to provide for the needy people. NAM has a woman who's the director, I believe, and she was saying yesterday, they were expecting 1,200 people to come to get food yesterday, and they were pouring in, and she was saying, I could tell she has a heart for it, because she said that if she could win the lottery, what more she would do for that particular group, to expand it, to reach more people. That was her heart expression, wanting to do more for this group.
And when you are boots on the ground and you see it,
yes,
that is the kind of thing that you have, that kind of empathy, you have those relationships that you want to do more.
And another point about that, I'll stop, that also shows you that people sometimes who through no fault of their own have lost their jobs.
Yes.
And they're in these lines, and there are 1,200 people with the fine vehicles coming through and dressed well. They are now coming, they need help.
Yes.
You can't judge them.
That's right.
Because they lost their jobs. They need help, like those who didn't have jobs in the first place.
That's right.
Who need help, they now need help too.
Yep. So I'm gonna fly through, real quick, yeah.
Well, I think that, I'm just a guest here, so I probably should not
We're glad
say
you're here.
anything. But I think the first thing, if we're really wanting to do this, is to understand that everything, every day that we have is a gift from God. And tomorrow's gifts may look completely different, but they will always be there.
That's right.
And I think another thing that we need to learn is that just like there's different levels of wealth within this room, within this city, and so forth, there are different levels of poverty. And until we know what level of poverty we're really talking about and which level of poverty we're wanting to work with, we can't really meet their needs.
Yeah, good thoughts, yeah.
I work with people in poverty who, by choice, live on the street. And what they want and need is completely different from, like you said, the person who just lost their job and is trying to figure out how to feed their family.
Yes, there's
And
different
they don't
solutions
want the
depending
same
on
things.
where people are at, right?
Right.
Yes.
And it's really interesting with parents, because some parents, even though they can barely feed their family, would rather see their child have a pair of Air Jordans, which, but think about it, because he's gonna be respected and envied and loved at school. Whereas when he's wearing his $5 tennis shoes with holes or whatever, kids are making fun of him. And as a parent, we don't want that. We want our kids to be able to fit in and be loved and respected.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think that, I love everything that you've said, but I think you need to decide where you want to serve. Because most of us can't serve the entire.
We can't serve everywhere, right?
Level.
Absolutely. I'm going to, so there's some takeaways on this sheet. You can think about this question on your own time. Why do you think this is a virtue that has been forgotten? Why have we forgotten it? Okay, but we won't answer it now. Your takeaways that I have given you on this sheet, there's kind of 3 different areas. One is just introspection, asking some of these questions, kind of looking at what are the things that maybe I do have, you know, kind of that are pulling me away or my attention away from God. 2, some internal prayer practices, the practice of gratitude, practicing contentment, and then practicing detachment, which comes from Ignatian spirituality, this idea of indifference, being able to let go of the things that are pulling us from God in order to focus more on the things that draw us closer. And then, step 3, what is one tangible way I could embody the virtue of poverty in my life? And these are just some ideas that I came up with. You may have something specific in your life. That would be a good practice. Something like fasting, things like that, that falls into this too. Like, what are some actual tangible things that I can do to practice this virtue in my life? That is class. Thank you for being here.